Brooksaw Antiques here. Today I'm going to show you how to remove and replace the feeder rollers on a 1940s to 1960s Smith Corona Sterling class typewriter. Basically, if your typewriter looks like this, it's a similar method on how to do this. Some of them will have a lever here, so all you have to do is flip this panel back and then push the lever down and it pops out your platen. This one needs a little bit more work. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the knob here. And it has one screw, very thin flathead. Then I'm going to remove these two screws on this panel here. And it has this nut here that holds in this plate that holds down the platen nice and tight. With a 1/4-inch wrench, I'm going to take that off. And sometimes you can hold it back and it'll spin off on its own. Sometimes you do have to get some pliers in the other side to loosen that. And I'm just going to push it up in a way so I can pull the platen out. So now that plate, this plate here, now that's out of the way, I can lift up the platen like this and it just pulls right out like that. And when you put it back in, you just need to line that end up with that first, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So now we have access to the front rollers, which can just be pulled out. It kind of just floats in there. Sometimes it has a bracket that's a little bit holding it in. You can just bend them a little bit to get them out of the way. I don't have the 3D printed version of this yet, so I'm just going to put that back in and remove the back rollers, the rear. So I'm going to pull the carriage out a little bit and show you sometimes there's a screw under here that holds in the bed. And let me get a close-up without. So right in here, there should be a screw, or I don't know why this one doesn't have one. Maybe some of them don't. But if there's a screw there, you need to remove that. And then you can just lift up this portion of this. You don't need to pull it all the way out, because on that side has the same. That side has the same thing on it. So, but you don't need to pull it all the way out. You just lift up this roller kind of out of the way, and pull it off that bracket, and now you can just pull this out and you have the rollers, the bigger rollers. So what I did was I had a different one and I removed the rubber off of them and I just put on these inserts very tight on there, and it just goes, this insert 3D printed just goes over the rod here, and then it stops at a little spot that you can see, little groove. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to push it in under, and it sits into these brackets, and you can get something to help you, like a screwdriver. And I don't know how much you can see right now, but it sits, the ends sit on a bracket, and it just kind of rolls on that. And you want to make sure you don't bend any of this metal. It's really thin, because then you might have issues loading the page if that's bent. So now I have the rear rollers on and they spin, and I'm going to put the front roller that fell out while I had it tipped over. I'm going to put that back in. It just sits on the brackets on the front side here. Very easy to replace that one. And then you want to make sure that the spot where that screw is supposed to go is lined up correctly before you put the platen back on. I'm going to flip this panel back, and now I'm going to put the platen back on just by kind of feeling it out. I'm going to just set it in there, and then hopefully and just like that, it matches up. You might need to turn it a little bit to get it to match. So now I have my platen in, and I'm going to take this plate, and I'm going to see if I can just move it back into place. Maybe get a little wrench. And that goes, you can do it like that, but it's supposed to go on that side. So however you want to do it, as long as it spins. So it's not going to spin that way. So I'm just going to take it all the way off a little. Actually, I'm just going to loosen it and pull it out a little bit. So there we go. And that's exactly where we want it. So I'm going to get a close-up of that. You want it to sit on the right side, just like that. So it pushes it down all the way. And then you can tighten that nut. And you don't want to remove that nut all the way if you don't have to, because on this side it's holding the spring for the paper release. So if you take this nut all the way off, then this falls out, then you got to deal with that. So just rather not have to deal with that. So now that we have the platen position good, we're going to tighten that nut. And sometimes you can just hold the back with your finger and then tighten this nut. And sometimes you might need to get some pliers on that back side so it doesn't spin, which it is now. So I'm just going to take these needle nose pliers here and just hold the back. There's a little, it's like a nut on that side too, so there's a groove that you can hold and then just tighten. And make sure the platen is nice and tight. There's no wiggle room in there. And then we can start replacing all the parts, which is, next is going to be this little panel with the 2 screws. And then we're going to put the knob on. So it goes, this screw goes into the groove on the end of the rod. So you got to loosen it as much as you have to get it to fit over that. And now, since we took it off, we're going to push in the knob on the back side so you get the clicks. And now we're going to test it with a piece of paper. To make sure that that feeder roller feeds properly. Perfect. Just have the paper bail in the way, but the back roller is nice. There's no clearance. It just sits nice and snug, and it feeds it. And then you move the paper bail out of the way. Perfect.